Hello and welcome to another episode of Topicality. Once again, I am Nishan.
My name is Antonius Brown.
Yes, and you know we love a politically engaged student, so let's get into what we're talking about today. So our main topic today is going to be the national state of emergency, because we love that.
Yes, Donald Trump has declared a national state of emergency to gather funding to build.
Emergency.
Yes, big quotes.
Yes.
To gather funding to build a wall on the southern border. It is not really emergency, as he
Yeah,
said.
and I don't think I'm being overly critical. He even said, I don't need to do this. And then he did it. So is it an emergency? I would contest nah.
So most statistics, ooh, that word did not come out correctly, put out by the government themselves say that most of the drug and the trafficking and human trafficking that happens through legal ports of entry, right? Or on planes coming in, people coming in on visas. That's how most of these things go down. And therefore, if there is a state of emergency, it's going to be at the actual national ports of entry. And you don't need to build a wall on the southern border to take care of these issues. But he did say, I don't need to do this. He said that on the White House lawn. So whenever he gets sued by the state of California first.
Oh yeah, the sewage, people are gonna sue, it's gonna rain sewage on this man.
When he gets sued and it goes in front of the Supreme Court, this will be something used in a case against him that he said himself that he does not need to do this.
He doesn't, but let's watch him still do it.
Yes.
And we're gonna talk about a few current events today. We're gonna talk about constitutional carry. That's something coming our way, especially in this wonderful Wild West that we call Texas. And we're also going to talk about Colin Kaepernick and his settlement with the NFL. And we're also going to talk about the police shootings that have been happening on our very own campus.
Shooting.
Oh, excuse me. Yes, it is a police shooting.
Yeah.
But we're going to be focusing on the national state of emergency after that because
there's a lot to get into.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about with the national state of emergency. But we'll be right back after this commercial break.
Traditions are not made overnight. They are created through a legacy of excellence and a commitment to something much greater. For more than 135 years, Prairie View A&M University has provided students with a strong academic foundation, a unique college experience, and the opportunity to make their mark on the world. This is a place where friendships are formed, discoveries are made, and dreams are realized. This is Prairie View A&M University, our tradition, your opportunity.
And we are back once again, and we're going to start with our very first current event, constitutional carry. Constitutional carry was just passed in Oklahoma, and if you don't know what constitutional carry is, that means that you can, in these certain states, because gun rights tend to be a state-to-state issue, you're allowed to get a handgun without a permit, a background check. You can just throw money and get a gun.
Yeah, so basically the Constitutional Carry Act, advocates say that the Second Amendment gives an individual the right to carry a gun at any time that they see fit. Money being handguns does not apply to long guns like your AR-15s, any type of weapon like an AK-47 or shotguns will not apply to this. But handguns is what apply to like pistols. It will allow you to buy one and then carry it on your person as you see fit because you have a constitutional right to it, so they say.
And as of right now, this is not in Texas, but we know Texas. The Texas motto is gun, 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 shoot, shoot. So there's 100% chance this is most likely going to carry over to Texas, whether we want it to or not.
Yeah, Texas currently is an open carry state, so as you, and more in the rural areas, you see guys walking around with guns on their belts. Now those are people who have passed, who have permits, handgun permits, and those who have passed what's called concealed carry classes. However, it is important to realize that those classes are not a lot of training goes into them.
Not a lot at all.
It's a one-day thing, and you go to the shooting range once, and then the score you have to be able to pass, it's laughable. So therefore, I don't think there's going to be too much difference between what we have now in Texas and constitutional carry.
There's also been talk about constitutional carry being overturned and becoming becoming like a federal policy for every single state. And it's funny that something called constitutional carry can do something so unconstitutional.
Yeah, this new so the new Supreme Court now being more right-leaning, right?
Yes, very
Most of these
conservative.
gun advocates, mainly Kavanaugh, when he was on the circuit in D.C., he overturned the D.C. gun laws, and he said that the Second Amendment gave the individual the right to carry. That's something that Scalia said first. So there's a new thinking among right-leaning judges that the Second Amendment applies to individuals and not states maintaining militias or your ability to be in a militia.
Which is, this should be a state-by-state issue. Every state has its own needs, and I'm sure California would hate to have guns in every corner, but Texas, as we know, would love to have guns in every corner. I expect to see a couple of guns when I walk into HEB at this point.
Yeah, so it should be a quite interesting showdown. We haven't heard anything about the Supreme Court ruling on this yet, but if there's like a law in like California, New York, where they try to preemptively block constitutional carry, this could go to the Supreme Court. So I would think California and New York will probably step lightly and just try to avoid the issue altogether.
In slight, defense of constitutional carry, some of these states do boast having lower crime rates. They boast that they have less gun violence somehow, and that less people get locked up because of gun charges. But at the end of the day, constitutional carry is not something I would personally advocate for. Throwing guns into a gunfire doesn't sound like a solution.
It's an interesting juxtaposition, because for black people, a lot of black guys get charges put on them because they have unregistered guns. If you have constitutional carry, you just buy a gun at your academy, and then you would technically be protected. So a lot of guys are saved from jail time now. You still have weed on you. That's another issue. Which a lot of times when the guys go to jail, these two things are put together. You have decriminalization of marijuana, which Texas Republicans have talked about.
Surprising.
And you have constitutional carry. You may see a lot less brothers going to jail on these type of issues.
So it could have some positives, but it could also fill the entire United States with guns more than it already has. We will be living in the wild, wild west, which I guess is a pro for some people.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Wild West was a time of women actually taking control of a lot of cities. It's quite interesting history.
Wild West women did take control of a lot of cities, but some people are like the Wild West was a time where there was a lot of guns, but there wasn't a lot of gun violence, because our records were so amazing in the wild, wild West.
Yes, it's quite an interesting issue.
But let's move on to our next current event, Colin Kaepernick and his settlement. I was actually surprised about this.
Yeah, so the NFL settled with Colin Kaepernick outside of court. And I want to say it's Eric Reed. I'm blanking on this guy's name. But they settled outside of court for their collusion case against the NFL. A little backstory, of course, Colin Kaepernick took a knee. This is the 2016 season to protest police shootings of unarmed black men and police brutality all together. You will see people say that he was protesting the national anthem. That's not what he was doing. Also, they'll throw veterans in front of us. As a veteran myself, that is complete
hogwash.
Bullshit. I'm just going to say it. It's complete bullshit. That is not what this is. I hate that people want to throw this in front of people who serve in this country and make this something about us when we definitely don't have anything to do with this, right? And
in truth, Colin Kaepernick consulted with the veteran. Yeah, he asked, because originally he was sitting down for the national anthem, and a veteran called him out on it. And then instead of being like, I'm just going to do whatever I want, he asked him for assistance.
Yeah, the guy was a Special Forces veteran, has served in Iraq and Afghanistan. And he was like, take a knee. Because in the Army, we take knees when people talk to us. And so it was a more respectful thing. A veteran told him it was okay for him to do it, and then he had his protest. And then now they're selling outside of court, because the NFL, when they can't win in court, they'll settle outside of court with you for a major dollar amount. They did this before when the foreign players sued them for hiding information about how concussions would adversely affect their health.
And I would like the courts, they originally tried to get this entire case dismissed, but the courts were like, no, we have something substantial, something that actually can be tried. So they eventually settled out of court, meaning that if they had went to court and actually like fought the fight,
Yeah.
it most likely would have been in Kaepernick's favor, because this is his First Amendment right. This is his right to protest. You do not. This isn't the U.S. military. You do not leave your constitutional rights at the door.
It would have been a quite interesting situation had it gone to court. I think some of the NFL's dirty laundry would have came out.
Oh yes.
While I do love football, go Texans all day long. However, I do think there are some things that goes on behind closed doors with the owners that is less than ideal. I definitely think there was collusion not to hire him because did not want to deal with him anymore. I think there's also collusion against other players. Like Tim Tebow probably could have quarterback another team, but they decided I don't want to deal with him anymore, and no one else hired him. And those type of things happen a lot. They'll just say decide together as owners, 32 owners, like, no, we're not going to deal with that anymore.
And what Colin Kaepernick did had a large effect. Students started doing this. Other colleges started doing this. This wasn't just him acting a fool alone. He really started a movement, so to say.
Yeah.
And recently, a kid even allegedly got kicked out of school for protesting the national anthem.
Yeah, it's getting ridiculous. The way people respond to this is absurd. But I respect Colin Kaepernick for putting his money where his mouth is. He donates a lot of money towards these organizations and these
Unlike
programs.
everyone who was like, we boycotting the NFL, but I saw you at that Super Bowl party.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. He put his money where his mouth is, and he actually put his nose to the grindstone, and he decided, I'm gonna do something that I feel is necessary for me to do, and he did it. So that, to me, that puts him in the same vein as like an Ali, even though Ali taking off from boxing for 5 years is a little more ridiculous than what Colin Kaepernick did.
Yeah, of course. And then people will say, in the future, we stood with Ali, but did you?
Yeah, a lot of people did not.
And people in the future will say, we stood with Kaepernick, but did we stand with Kaepernick? Well, Neil.
Tweets last forever, so, you know.
Tweets last forever, yes. But let's move on to our next current event, something more localized here. There was a shooting at our very own university.
Yeah, so in the phases, phase 1 and 2 are, what's their actual names?
The Village.
The University Village, yes. There was 2 shootings that happened a couple weeks ago, and in the state of Texas, with Prairie View and police got a warrant signed for the arrest of the perpetrator, the person who was a suspect in the crime. And this is coming from the words the chief's mouth, right? So this is what we know from the chief, and what we heard from reports from the Houston Chronicle, ABC 13, a bunch of news sources kind of conglomerated together. But they had a warrant for him. They had police officers sitting on several of his houses. One was in Belleville, which is about 15 miles outside of from Prairie View. One misconception real quick. Prairie View and police have jurisdiction throughout the state of Texas, right? So as long as you're a police officer in the state of Texas, you can issue a warrant anywhere in the state of Texas. Also, as long as, because Prairie View and is part of the Texas A&M system, which is a long, horrid story to go into, but also because we're part of the Texas A&M system, as long as we're anywhere in the jurisdiction of a Texas A&M campus, Prairie View police officers have a jurisdiction there. So that's all the way from Killeen and Dallas, all the way down to
Corpus Christi.
Corpus Christi, yeah, that they have jurisdiction. But anyway, they went and served a warrant. They were in a marked vehicle. One of the cops saw the suspect pull up. He saw the police officer. He took off, and he had a weapon in his hand when he took off. The police stepped out of the car. Now, this is what the chief's words were, almost verbatim.
Yeah.
Somehow the gun ended up in the direction, the muzzle of the gun ended up in the direction of the officer.
So somehow, not a point, did the gun get tossed to the floor?
Yes, that's what he said. I'm just going to repeat what he said. You can do with that what you will. And then the officer shot at the suspect twice. One of them hitting him in the neck. He's now life flight to the hospital. Texas Rangers have started an investigation. But he did have a weapon on him. And the officer also was there to serve a warrant.
I would also like to note the shootings that happened on the PV campus. No one was seriously injured from these shootings. They were a drive-by, and shots were fired at a local, the Village basketball courts.
Yeah, basketball courts. Yeah.
Yeah, and no one was injured, amazingly.
Yeah, but it was definitely something that really shook people. It shook the community, people who lived here, and they wanted to go find the guy who did it.
Yeah.
So there's some misconceptions was that he was not armed. That's what his defense attorney was saying.
There has been a lot of protest about this.
Yeah, there was a small protest outside the police station where Houston activists, with quotes, I'm gonna put that in quotes, Quanah X showed up in the icy cocaine white Porsche.
An ice?
Pulled up to do a protest with the family.
Is that the protest vehicle that he tends to use?
I guess. But anyway, they were protesting because they said that he did not have a weapon on him, and they were saying that they were wondering why Prairie Unit Police was in Belleville. But both of those things, just kind of fact checking. They had a right to be in Belleville, and then they actually recovered a weapon from the scene. Now, as more information comes out, I would tell you to wait until the Texas Rangers investigation is finished before you make your final decision on whether or not who you believe. But I would think that it's best not to falsify and say.
Yes,
say things
let's stop this wave of just following whatever anyone's tweeting. What are facts anymore when all we do, someone tweets out, this happened, this is a fact, with no background, with no information. That's too much power for people to have. We can't just look on Twitter for all our local news and all our political news, because Twitter's not always 100% right.
Yeah, it's I would say almost less than 50% correct.
And out of those 2,000 tweets about this one topic, there will be one that is almost maybe correct.
Yeah, it's I think it in an age where we get information very fast and things are constantly changing. I do think the ability to wait and see is a lost art. When you had a time of newspapers where things had to go to the edit and then they had to come in the next day. Not saying that factual stories did not get written, but
yes, they were written.
But it was a lot easier for you to have time to wait and see than when you get to react in just the moment of hearing something and not having enough time for someone else to fact check it before it's sent out.
And that was, if we could fact check things when we were waiting a day in the newspaper, why can't we Google search, go on CNN, what is happening, instead of just running towards insert social media platform and people make such a strong stance about the things they see on Twitter that they have no bearing to.
Yeah. I think Twitter rewards that type of behavior.
You were 100% right.
I think Facebook too rewards the behavior of saying things, being the first one to say it, and saying with the most gusto and vigor possible.
With your chest.
Yeah. And then there are no consequences for saying anything incorrect, unless maybe your news outlets. So BuzzFeed has some reporting that came back to be not fully factual, and they took it.
If you get your news from BuzzFeed, I'm gonna need you to find a news source. But yes.
Yeah, but for the average human being, I don't think there's any consequences for saying things off the bat as you feel is necessary for you to say with as much gusto as possible. And even if you're wrong, I think you'll still gain followers, and you will gain
so many followers for being wrong.
Yeah, it's still be a thing. The president is the main example of this.
Speaking of gusto.
Yeah, the main example is someone saying with his chest, but being very completely wrong.
Yes, and now that we're bringing up the president, once we get back from a commercial break, we will be talking about the national state of emergency. That is apparently happening, as opposed to every statistic. We'll be right back.
Prairie View A&M University is about the students. Students don't just come here for the education. They come for the faculty, for the creativity, the camaraderie, an excellent standard of living, and the school spirit. They come here to gain something profound and to give something back. Students come for the tradition of excellence. This is Prairie View A&M University. Our tradition, your opportunity.
Stay calm.
Once again, we are back with Topicality, and today's beautiful, amazing topic is the national state of emergency that I know the world is vibrating, shaking, all of America is on their knees from the pure power that is exuding from the world right now, from this emergency.
Yeah, it's unnecessary.
Yes.
So the previous national state of emergencies were things that actually mattered. So when President Carter declared a national state of emergency, was to take property from the Iranian government after there was a rebellion. They threw over the, I'm going to use the wrong word here, their president, basically, the Shah, I want to say. They overthrew him, and they took 54 Americans hostage. I want to say it was the correct number of Americans took hostage. Because of that, they declared a state of emergency and seized property from the Iranian government that was in America.
And you know what that sounds like, Tony?
National emergency.
Exactly.
Yeah. Then during the 80s, Nicaragua had started to flirt with communism. And then
Dangerous love affair.
Dangerous if you're in the Cold War, and you want Marines to kick in your door.
Yes.
So therefore, we decided to start to Reagan decided to fund a rebel support group in Nicaragua, and then he had no trade to Nicaragua, which was, I guess, in the Cold War, that's a national state of emergency when you're trying to stop the spread of communism through your hemisphere. The second one is Clinton declared national state of emergency to no longer trade with terrorists, no transactions with terrorists who are causing issues with the Middle East peace process. And then Obama declared a national state of emergency over the H1N1 flu vaccine crisis, basically. It was not enough vaccines. People were catching the flu. And the flu can murder a lot of people. And I want to say it was a 20 Spanish flu, like murdered millions of people. So the flu is a real thing, and when it becomes a problem, that's how Rise of the Planet of the Apes happens. Yeah.
And keep in mind that national state of emergencies have only been called around 31 times.
Yes.
We have been a country for a minute.
Yeah.
And 31 times this has been called. So this isn't something we just throw out willy-nilly, but maybe it is now. Maybe it's just setting a precedence for it getting it's raining national emergencies.
The problem is that what Donald Trump has done is considered to be a nuclear option, right? So the best way to explain this was that when Obama was president, the Republicans refused to allow him to have Supreme Court justice approved because, Yeah. And anyway, so therefore they did a nuclear option. They changed the rule to where Supreme Court justice can be approved with 51 votes, basically, a simple majority as it is called. So you could bring in Biden, he could cast a final vote, and that's your 51 votes to approve your Supreme Court justice. Well, when Kavanaugh got approved, and they just kind of railroaded the entire process, they used that same rule to get him approved. It doesn't matter the fact that most Democrats, all of them did not want him to be approved. They just railed over them, and they used the nuclear option that the Democrats have put in place. With this national emergency, I don't know what the Democrats would do, but they could use this as a precedent to do something completely wild, or something that's not an emergency, right? And this could cause a rift down the road. When you start to erode democracy piece by piece, it starts to come back at you later down the road.
And Trump has called a national emergency for the invasion of immigrants.
Yeah.
And this is what he says. This is an invasion. They're bringing drugs and crimes and terrible things to the United States, even though statistics from the government had said that this is actually on a decline. Yeah. Immigration is the best that it's been in a decade. So why is it a national state of emergency? And when Trump was challenged on this by the journalist from CNN, I believe?
Jim Acosta from CNN.
Yes, from the CNN. Trump said these are fake statistics, government statistics, and he gets his statistics from many places.
Many sources, yes.
Many sources. And I know at the end of every single one of my essays that I write for school, I write on my bibliography, I just write many books, a journal, some places. And if he's claiming that these statistics are incorrect or wrong, why are these government statistics incorrect or wrong? Or have you just never read them, is my question.
I think he has. There's a joke that a late night news show host says that Donald Trump can't read. If you ever watch any of his depositions, I don't know if she's not telling the truth.
We are all curious.
But anyway, it's quite interesting because so there are issues at the border. So we're going to have a real discussion about this. There are issues at the border. El Chapo was rich and had a living because drugs were brought through Mexico into the United States of America. That is a thing. Most of it was heroin. That's why we had the opioid crisis, which, I don't know why the crack epidemic was not called the crack crisis, and we weren't building schools, this, building
you know
rehab
why.
centers. Oh, of course I know why. It's because it was black people. But anyway, heroin is a real issue.
Yeah.
There is such thing of a opioid crisis. These are things that are happening at the southern border. However, they happen at national ports of entries. Drug dealers are bold enough to just pack a car full of them and just drive over the actual border. Why do I have to walk through Arizona and maybe die in the desert when I can just walk across the actual crossing point and you're not going to catch me? Because most of the crossing points have very few guards. The checks are maybe like 1 in 5 on a best day, maybe 1 in 10 vehicles. You have no what's called X-ray scanning equipment, and if you can do it very well, you can probably pay off the guards to get through. So therefore, our system at the border is broken. If you're going to declare a national state of emergency, it's to fix that, not to put a wall when you don't need wall.
I cannot imagine what a wall would solve. I mean, it'll put us into a lot of debt.
Yes.
I mean, that's because the wall is estimated to cost around, he estimates $8 billion for this wall.
He said $8 billion, but any estimate that we've heard is in the trillions to build, keep it up, and like keep it not falling apart. Which, I don't know if America can actually build something and not have it fall apart, because we don't do a very good job with our infrastructure in the first place when it comes to our very own roads and bridges. I think most of the cities got grades of C or worse when it came to the infrastructure. So you're going to build a wall and you're going to keep it up and maintain. I don't believe that. Also, did he not see the video of El Chapo building a huge underground tunnel and just riding a motorcycle through there?
Yes, people will find a way.
Yeah.
This is a wall. This isn't a force field. This is a construction.
Yeah, if you're motivated enough to sell heroin, you're motivated enough to go over or under a wall.
Yes, you are motivated enough to dig.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is that most immigration overstays, they happen on visas. People come over the United States on a visa and they just don't go home, and that's how most of this happens. Is not crossing the southern border. The highest amount of crossings was during the height of the Bush administration. Since the Obama administration is slowly declined, and during the Trump administration slowly declined. Now, if I was a Trump advocate, which I'm definitely not, he would tell you, well, my rhetoric has made a decline. However, it was already declining during the Obama years. So I don't know how that works.
I think, why am I saying I think? When I know that Trump is just pushing this and calling this national state of emergency. We'll get into a little bit later what exactly entails a national state of emergency, why he exactly called this. But he is doing this to deliver on a campaign promise and to cast so that people can cast their vote for 2020. This is not and it's not in his heart. He knows a wall is needed. He is doing this to deliver on a campaign promise. This isn't a genuine feeling.
It's so therefore his constituents are people who believe. Well, I won't generalize them like that, right? So there's a cohort of his constituents. So some people in his constituents who believe that immigrants are coming to take our jobs or they make us unsafe, right? None of these things are true. Most immigrants commit the least amount of crimes when it comes to general population, because they don't want to go back home.
Very true.
So the less interaction with the police you have, the better. So anyway, but part of his constituents believe that maybe they're coming to hurt us, and they're the people who are going to advocate and be on his behalf to the bitter end. If he does not build a wall, right? So when the government shutdown happened and he caved, which he did, he caved, Fox News went into a frenzy, and they were like, well, this is just halftime. He's gonna come back and he's gonna get this wall, because he had made such a big campaign promise that if it looked like he caved to the Democrats, he loses a lot of his manhood.
Footing for 2020.
Yeah, like part of the fascination with them is that he's supposed to be a manly president, that Obama was not a manly president, which I don't know how that's possible. But anyway,
he was a man.
but that he's a manly president. But caving to Nancy Pelosi, a woman and a Democrat of that nature, would be unmanly, and therefore to save face, he must declare a national state of emergency to get his wall. $8 billion would barely even like put a dent into like actually
And
starting this.
let's talk about why he called a national state of emergency. This is to override Congress.
Yes.
This is what this is about, and this is to access more money than before. And can you break down where this money is coming from?
Yeah, so a big part of it is coming from the amount of money that's used for military construction, right? So building barracks on bases. And the funny thing about this is that not too recently, some military generals were brought in front of Congress and to talk about the crisis at bases when it comes to housing, which is something you know about personally.
Oh yeah, base housing is a crisis. I lived on a base for a very long time, and it was not lit. Spent a lot of time in a motel.
Yeah, the housing. That's like I spent training at Fort Bliss before I went to Afghanistan, and the housing
Fort
there.
Bliss.
Yes, the housing there was like it was built in the 70s. These are houses that our soldiers live in, and there's like a serious issue with the barracks because some of them have mold, some of them are they still have group showers,
Wow.
because it's built really old time.
Our soldiers are living in a dormitory.
Yes, we were literally living in a dormitory. We weren't living in connexes, which are you know what a connex is?
Actually, no.
A connex is the box that's on the back of a train. Yeah, you hollow it out and then you put AC inside of it and you make it into a living condition, which actually could solve the homeless crisis in Los Angeles, but that's for another time.
Yes, that is for another time.
But yeah, so there is a serious issue when it comes to a crisis, when it comes to military housing on bases, but he's taking that money and using it to build a wall on a southern border.
And we need to address this. We need to address that this national state of emergency is not truly an emergency. But we'll talk more about Trump and the things that he's planning in the future. And we'll catch you next time on Topicality.
Goodbye.